Can a registered domain name have no DNS records at all? Normally, after a domain name is registered, it has some DNS records. But recently, I found some registered domain names that have no DNS records. For example, I ran dig00000onlinecasino.com any, but it did not return any DNS records, not even the NS record, despite the fact this is a registered domain. Is it possible to have no DNS records, or is there some error in the DNS system?
Doctor, it's extremely unlikely, though not technically impossible, that a properly registered domain would have zero DNS records. The existence of the domain must be announced to the global DNS system by an update provided by the domain registrar. Failure by the registrar to provide this update would constitute failure to perform the duty delegated to them by the IANA. At minimum, every domain has one or more DNS glue records. When a domain is registered, the domain registrar sends an update to the generic top-level domain, GTLD, servers responsible for the TLD in question. For example, registering the domain, example.com, triggers an update to the .com GTLD servers, which are operated by VeriSign. This update includes the authoritative name server, NS, records from the domain's whois data. The GTLD server then creates a DNS glue record for the domain pointing to the authoritative name servers. These glue records are what enable the GTLD servers to refer incoming queries to the authoritative name servers for the domain. Therefore, unless the domain registrar fails to perform the duty delegated to them by IANA, a lookup against any registered domain will return the authoritative name server records for that domain. Then why aren't lookups for onlinecasino.com returning any records? It appears that everything has taken place as described above. In other words, this domain's registrar, namebright.com, has created the required whois entry and submitted the NS records to the com GTLD servers. I confirmed this as follows by running this lookup set to query for NS records. I also used this handy glue record checker from mebs.com which confirmed the results. However, the same query when performed against any of these name servers is returning an error. Since these servers are authoritative for this domain, they should at least know about it and identify themselves as the NS records for the domain. Given this, it's clear that these NS servers have been misconfigured. I must allow that the definition of zero DNS records is open to interpretation. As demonstrated by this question's test case, the authoritative name servers aren't responding, giving cause to the argument that the domain has no records. However, I prefer the view that a domain's glue records are essentially the other half of a domain's NS records. After all, without the glue records, any attempts to look up the authoritative name servers for a domain would result in the circular instruction to go ask, insert name server here. More information. What is a glue record? From Server Fault. Server Fault answer explaining authoritative NS records, glue records, and GTLD servers. Domain name system on Wikipedia. Me, BSD online glue record lookup tool.
Yes, there are multiple ways this can happen. To start, let's review how DNS lookup works for a record like www.example.com. The DNS resolver contacts a root name server, which responds with a delegation to the COM-TLD name servers. The resolver contacts the COM-TLD name server, which responds with a delegation to the registered name servers for example.com. The resolver contacts one of the registered name servers for example.com, which responds with the records for www.example.com. First, the name servers for example.com could have deleted all records for example.com. While domain servers are supposed to always have certain records, including SO and NS records, available for a domain, there is nothing in practice which forces them to do so. A domain missing these records may not work properly with some resolvers, but if the domain has no DNS records anyways, there's no practical difference. Second, the name servers for example.com could reject or fail to respond to queries. The DNS records only exist within these name servers, so if the name servers aren't responding with the records effectively don't exist. Third, the COM registry could suspend the registration for example.com, for example if the domain registration lapsed. This will cause the COM name servers to stop returning a delegation to the example.com name servers, making any records there unavailable. Just as before, if the records aren't accessible, they might as well not exist.
There are two parts to registering the domain: getting it allocated by the registry and setting up a DNS. For most, all domains, DNS name server entries need to be provided for the domain to be registered. Different TLDs have different requirements, but most require a minimum of 2 servers be specified. Often, however, there is no requirement that these name servers are valid, so you can get away with putting anything in these fields. The second part is setting up the zone on the name servers. Generally it's possible to leave this step out when registering a domain name, but a lot of registrars will set up default entries as part of your registration. So, no, it's not possible to not specify any name servers in most cases, but the specified name servers don't need to work. In this case, whois, which queries the registrar database, will generally show the name servers, but dig/n's lookup, which relies on DNS working, won't, although I have seen domains with no name servers specified.
It would help if you could join some screenshots of what you're getting. But without this information, I theorize that you are looking in the wrong place. When a specific name server is not specified in the command invocation, dig will look in your /etc/resolve.conference file and will query the DNS servers that are listed in there. If the domain you are searching for is not listed with the DNS servers in your copy of resolve.conference, then it will not be found. You should add to the file a DNS server for that domain, or specify it on the dig command, by preference one that can give an authoritative answer.
If you want to support the channel, please consider subscribing.